The origins of football can be traced back to ancient times. We can see that various games similar to football were played in different civilizations around the world at all times. Historical records show that one of the first examples of this was in ancient China between 5000 and 2500 BC. This game, played by kicking the ball with the foot, was called Su Chu. Su means kicking with the foot, while Chu means stuffed leather ball. In this sense, Su Chu is actually quite similar to the word football. This game is also called Kuju. In fact, Kuju seems to be a different pronunciation of the word Su Chu. However, it is not known exactly how the game started. Su Chu had different reasons for playing. It was essentially a show game and was held on the emperor's birthday. Players would form two teams and try to kick the ball with their feet into a hole 30 to 40 square centimeters in diameter. Different versions of the game emerged over time. During the Qin dynasty in 200 BC, the Su Chu game was used as part of physical training for soldiers. Players or soldiers would pass the ball among themselves and try to keep it in the air. This version of the game is still played today in China. Japan. In the 7th century, a game similar to Su Chu was played in Japan. In Japan, it was called Kemari. The common thought is that Kemari entered Japan via China. Popular during the Heian period, it was usually played by aristocrats. Kemari was considered a social ritual and was often played during festivals. The aim of the game is to keep the ball in the air and perform various acrobatic movements in the process. It is still played traditionally today. Egypt. One of the oldest examples of games involving the ball object is from ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, paintings, signs, and objects have been found that indicate that a game similar to soccer was played around 2500 BC. It is thought that the games played with the ball in Egypt at this time were a kind of religious entertainment dedicated to the pharaohs and gods. These balls found in Egyptian tombs, made of linen and filled with various substances, are on display in museums in Cairo, Berlin, and London. Australia. Marngrook is a traditional ball game played by the indigenous Aboriginal people of Australia. It was particularly popular among the Wawurrung and Jab Wurrung communities in the western regions of Victoria. The name Marngrook means game ball in the Wawurrung language. Although the origins of the game are not clearly established, it was recorded from the mid-19th century onwards by European observers who settled in Australia for colonization. The rules of Marngrook are not fully documented, but the main objective of the game is to catch the ball in mid-air. It was usually played with large groups of players, ranging from 50 to 100 people. The game was played with a ball made from the skin of an opossum, filled with charcoal and tied with a kangaroo tail nerve. Players could only kick the ball with their feet, and once they caught it, they could not move. Players who could catch the ball high were praised and awarded a free kick. For Aboriginal communities, Marngrook was more than just a game. It was a social and cultural event. Communities would come together for these games, sometimes lasting days, and compete against teams from different regions. The game was seen as a means to develop physical skills and community spirit. There are strong claims that Marngrook inspired the development of the rules of modern Australian rules football. Tom Wills, one of the founders of Australian football, is thought to have played Marngrook with Aboriginal children as a child, and these experiences inspired him to create the rules of modern football. Canada and Greenland. Aksaktuk is a traditional game played by Inuit, which means game on ice. The game has been passed down from generation to generation for centuries and has become an important part of Inuit culture. Although the exact origins of Aksaktuk are unknown, it is thought to have existed in Inuit culture for centuries. The game is also frequently featured in Inuit myths and legends. According to the stories, the spirits of the dead play ball game with a walrus head under the northern lights. These stories show the deep cultural and spiritual significance of the game for the Inuit people. Aksaktuk is usually played between two teams, and the number of players on each team can vary. The game begins with the teams lining up opposite each other. The goal of the game is to get the ball beyond the opposing team's line. At this point, all players move quickly to throw the ball into the opponent's goal. Players try to control the ball not only with their feet but also with their sticks. The length of the playing field can vary considerably, and some legendary matches have been played on vast fields with as much as 10 miles between the goals. This vast playing field reflects the vast and rugged landscapes of the Arctic. The ball used in Aksaktuk is a ball made of animal skin and whale bones, filled with materials such as hair, moss, feathers, and sawdust. This structure makes the ball resistant to icy conditions. The two teams often take names based on birds, such as snow partridges and longtails. This symbolizes the Inuit people's close relationship with their natural environment. During the summer months, the direction of play is determined by where the players live, with the longtails playing towards the water and the snow partridges towards the land. More than just a game, Aksaktuk is a cultural celebration. Matches often include song duels, and players try to embarrass the opposing team with their performance. After the game, the community gathers in a large communal igloo called Kagi and continues the celebrations with feasts and traditional activities. This communal activity is very important for social cohesion and cultural identity in Inuit society. Today, Aksaktuk is not as widely played as it once was, but its legacy remains an important part of Inuit culture. The game demonstrates the Inuit people's ability to adapt to harsh environmental conditions and to create entertainment in these conditions. In conclusion, Aksaktuk is a demonstration of rich cultural traditions that blend physical skill with deep spiritual and social values. However, Aksaktuk was not the only ball game that existed in Inuit culture. Different games have survived to the present day. Today's ice hockey is thought to be based on the games of the Inuit people. As a result, ball games remain a symbol of resilience and cultural pride for the Inuit people. Mesoamerica. Ball games in ancient Mesoamerican cultures stand out as complex ritual sports that were central to social and religious life. Among the best-known examples of these games are the ball games played by the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec civilizations. These ball games were called Ulama, Tlaklai, and Paktatok. Ball fields were often built as large stone structures, and important social and religious events were organized around them. In these cultures, the game was played as a ritual offering to the gods and a symbol of social order. Players wore game-specific clothing, especially protective helmets, belts, knee and elbow pads, and gloves. They also decorated themselves with various stones and paints. The matches were fierce and brutal. The winning side was honored. The losing side was offered to the gods in a religious ritual. These games were traditionally practiced for a long time. They began during the Olmec period and continued to be played widely until the Spanish colonization of the Aztec country. However, when Mexico became a Spanish colony, the Catholic Church considered the game ungodly and banned it. When some players who had been brought from Mexico to Europe as slaves played in Europe, the Catholic Church again banned the game, labeling it a barbaric activity. Today, modern versions of Mesoamerican ball games are still played in some regions. In Mexico, in particular, it is traditionally kept alive by some local communities under the name of Ulama. This game aims to preserve the cultural heritage of their ancestors and pass it on to younger generations. At the same time, these games are also performed at touristic events and cultural festivals, reinforcing the indigenous people's sense of identity and sharing their cultural richness with the world. Greece. It is known that in ancient Greece, around 600 BC, the Greeks played a ball game called Episkiros. In this ball game, there were 12 to 14 people on each team, with free body contact and free use of hands. Behind each team, lines were drawn representing the goal, and white-colored lines dividing the playing field into two halves. The aim of the game was to pass the ball across the goal line of the opposing team. Players passed the ball between themselves and carried it with their hands and feet. In ancient Greece, there were many teams playing the game, and they also played against each other during the annual festivals in Sparta. The game was rough, and sometimes women played. The aim of the game was to score more points or to force the other side to give up. It was an aristocratic game and was played naked. The first balls were made by twisting and sewing materials such as cloth and rope. Later, they were made by inflating a pig's bladder and covering it with pig or deer skin. There were other types of ball games in ancient Greece, but Episkiros was the most similar to rugby and football. Rome. The Romans developed a game called Harpastum, inspired by the Episkiros game of ancient Greece and other ball games, such as Fininda. Harpastum was originally played by Roman soldiers. This game was part of the physical training of soldiers. As a team game, Harpastum was very rough and injuries were frequent. Both hands and feet were used in the game. Matches took place on rectangular fields, between teams of more than 20 players, with players passing the ball and trying to get it through the opposing team's territory. As the Roman Empire grew, the Harpastum moved to different parts of Europe. The Harpastum, which was inherited from ancient Greece, though not on its own, is thought to have been a major inspiration for today's ball games such as handball, rugby, football, and American football. Italy. Another game that inspired football is Calcio, Calcio Storico, or Calcio Fiorentina. Traditionally played in Fiorentina, Italy, Calcio dates back to 16th century Italy. It is still played today. The game is a mixture of heavy physical games such as boxing, cage fighting, wrestling, as well as ball. Everything is allowed in the game except headbutting. Friends, as the Romans moved northward across Europe, they kept their culture alive in the places they visited. Another game that was influenced by Harpastum and developed as a new culture emerged in France. This game, called Choule or Soul, was a hard and fast ball game. This game essentially emerged as a local version of Harpastum as a result of the Romans winning the Gallic Wars in the 50s BC and spreading their culture. Although the origins of this game are ancient, the first concrete sources date back to the 12th century. It was traditionally played in the northern regions of France, such as Bretagne, Normandy, and Picardy. Violent elements such as punching, biting, or scratching were commonplace. Two teams would try to move a wooden or leather ball with feet or sticks to the opposing field. The game was played by large crowds in rivalries between villages. One game could involve hundreds of players. Choule was an important social event, especially during village festivals. There were different versions of the game. In general, the game is very similar to the field hockey played today. And Great Britain. After Harpastum was adopted by other European tribes, it came to be known by different names. It spread throughout Great Britain, especially in England, followed a similar process. The first evidence of ball games played in England dates back to 1170. In England, ball games similar to football were played in meadows, villages, and roads. The ball used was usually made from pig or cow bladders. The balls were very heavy because they were filled with leather, straw, foam, or dried grass. Games were played with both hands and feet and were very violent. Matches were usually between two teams and spread over a very large area. The teams would be so large that matches were played from village to village. The goal was to reach a certain point in front of the opposing team or the village church. There was no order to the game. Everyone was running here and there after the ball. This game, which spread to England in different ways, was loved by both nobles and commoners. However, there were also those who were uncomfortable with it. Edward II, who was trying to conquer Scotland at the beginning of the 14th century, banned the game for the first time in 1314 on the grounds that it would have a negative effect on the recruitment of English youth into the army. It was banned many times in various ways in the following centuries. However, people's desire to cheer themselves up, their desire to chase the ball, and their ambition to win never diminished. People's intense interest in the game lessened the effect of the bans. Students in public schools in the UK also loved the game. In fact, in the 19th century, the game quickly spread to the leading public schools in England. However, the game was seen more as a winter activity. Also, although the exact date is unknown, the words kickball, soccer, and football developed in England during this period. As a result, various ball games, which we can call the predecessor games of football, have always existed in different parts of the world throughout history. Each people created these games according to their living conditions, religious beliefs, and culture. Undoubtedly, there is interaction and learning between all civilizations and cultures. However, the first organic source, if not the oldest source, of games developed in Europe is definitely ancient Greece. However, similar games have existed or still exist in many other cultures that we can't name. So, Can we call these ball games, which existed long before football, football? The ball games played in ancient times are quite different from today's football. Therefore, these games can't be seen as modern football. On the other hand, they are examples of a diverse cultural heritage that inspired and contributed to the development of modern football. Each of them played an important role in its community and were recognized as activities that developed physical skills and strengthened social bonds. So, do you have any of these traditional ball games? Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up if you liked the video.